Well, hello everybody. Welcome back to Aquarius Rising Africa. And again, oops, I haven't get myself switched on here. I have with me a very, very interesting guest this evening, Taylor Northcutt. And we're going to be talking about Proopa. He's got from Proopa Technologies. Now, Taylor, I've probably got it wrong because I'm so confused by all of this, which I'm really hoping, and I know that we're going to be chatting about this tonight anyway. But basically, hello, Mama, is your face just biology or a map of deeper archetypal patterns? So Taylor's an amazing gift. I came across him on YouTube, a channel on YouTube not too long ago, and I thought, wow, I definitely needed to invite him as a guest because he combines, I would say, like ancient traditions with modern genetics, right? Cultural history, archetypal psychology, and astrological symbolism to explore whether facial structure may reveal deeper personality types. What a wonderful and interesting topic. So, Taylor, without any further ado, I welcome you onto the stage with me.
Hey.
How are you doing? And welcome to Aquarius Rising Africa. It's so good to have you with us today.
Yes. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me. Wonderful opportunity. Love your show. And yeah, so
love yours too.
Well, thank you. Well, it's good that we're finally able to do this together now. So yes,
Absolutely.
Like you said, I work with Proopa Insights. That's my brand on YouTube and my website, other social media. And I specialize in what is technically known as physiognomy. That comes from the ancient Greek, physis meaning body, gnomon meaning judgment. So it's the judgment or the discerning of the body, of the physical appearance for deeper meaning. And so, of course, that can involve anything with the body, but most people focus on the face because the face is a very detailed structure. It's very sensitive to genetic, epigenetic, hormonal changes. And human beings are pre-wired genetically to recognize faces and notice things about faces. And I have my own theories about why that is, not just for emotional expression, but possibly also for being able to pick up genetic and epigenetic tells. And so that's what I do. I do YouTube videos on it. I do paid client consultations on my website, and people have been really liking it so far. I've really been surprised by the all the feedback I've been getting. People are coming out of the woodwork saying, wow, this really works. You read me like a book. I can't believe you can tell these things about people. And so it's really been a wonderful thing to see that people have been liking it.
I certainly did. And as I mentioned to you when we first chatted, your one of your videos came up on my screen, on my feed, and I thought, interesting. I love this because actually my son, when he was younger, he would say to me, Mom, I read faces. I don't know how, but he says I can tell by the lines, the way they smile, like different characteristics of the faces. He was able to naturally, and I'd never heard that before. And of course, I come from a family where my grandmother's a seer, that sort of stuff. So none of this is new, for me, palmistry, anything like that, So that has always interested me. So therefore, when I saw actually your channel, I thought, wow, I really wanted to watch this. And the first one I saw was actually about Erica Kirk. And I thought, okay, everyone's on the Erica Kirk bandwagon right now. Let's see what you have to say about her. And I was really pleasantly surprised because what I loved was that you were not taking the scandalous route. It wasn't like everyone was up in arms and she's this and that. And, on this channel, we are no strangers to any of that. We know all about the deep state and all that nonsense. But I found that very interesting because you were able to give a really balanced perspective and coming from I would say, a scientific perspective, on actually reading the facial, maybe expressions, bone structure, etc. But before we get on to that, I want to just ask you, because people like you, to me, are very interesting. Somebody who follows this sort of path, I think, for me, is a super interesting character, because I was born with a gift, and I was the only one in my family and in my school and in my hostel, because I was a boarding school kid. We lived on the farm. So I found that very frustrating. And I think I recognize that in other people who are kind of maybe born with some maybe different tools that we use, different insights, maybe perspectives on life, whatever you want to call it. So how did you get to do what you are doing? I mean, I'd be very interested for you to maybe just guide us through that process as well, of how you got to where you are, and then of course launch into what you're doing, how you do it, and all the amazing, interesting things as well.
Yeah, well, it's I liked what you said about your son, how he had this intuitive gift. My grandfather was the same way, but with eyes. He would always tell me, I can tell anything about someone's eyes. The eyes tell you so much. And I could see that someone. But for me, you say your grandmother's a seer, you're a healer. I actually do not have much of a natural intuitive gift for this stuff. I'm very analytical, so I can look at people and look at patterns and sort of figure out trends. But there was never anything that I was necessarily born with, where I could look at a face and know all these things. This was mostly taught. For me, I come at it from a scientific perspective. I wouldn't call myself a scientist. I don't have a PhD or anything. Maybe scientifically aspirational. That's sort of the mindset I like to take. And not to say that I don't love the mystics and the healers and the astrologers. I mean, those are in a sense kind of my people. I have a lot of friends who are into that, both professional colleagues and close personal friends. So I'm kind of in that world somewhat, and I know those people. But myself, I take more of a scientific view of it, because that's how I learned physiognomy. It was not this intuitive inborn, didn't come to me in a dream. I looked at all the different sources, and this is one of the things that I do in my process, is that I'm always looking for and going through new sources on face reading physiognomy, because there's a lot of them. You have different traditions from all over the world. You have ancient Greek, ancient Roman, Chinese, Indian, Islamic, modern Western. And so part of the process for me was going through all these different things and reading all of them and discerning where they align, and then sort of adding in my own observations. I've had various little journals over the years where I would, look at people in my life, friends, family, notice kind of, hey, these three people, they have this facial feature and they all have this personality trait, and that seems to make sense. So I'll make a note of that, and then sort of deriving from that. And so it's been this thing that's been built up gradually, step by step over time, where, I do think some people have a good intuitive ability for reading stuff like that. Maybe women more so on average, because they tend to be a little more intuitive, but men as well, certainly some. But I say all that to say that I, was not necessarily born for this. It was all sort of learned and built up over time. And it is very much something that you can teach yourself and train yourself. And it's not like, oh, I wasn't born with the gift, I can't do it. No, this is something that I think everyone can do, because there's objective, observable things that you can look for and study.
Do you find, okay, well, let me rather ask you, where do you personally maybe, and find other people who do this, have studied this, where would you find this to be most advantageous? I mean, if you, let's say you're dealing with a boss or a bank manager, God forbid, I think we've all been a little bit terrified of those in our lives. And, any maybe, how would you use this to your advantage. And I'm not necessarily saying in a manipulative way, no, and I'm sure some people do, but I'm just saying as a life skill, as
Yeah,
everyday
certainly.
life skill.
There's a lot of places you can use it. And so for something like that example, let's say it's a boss, bank manager, someone maybe in a hostile, testy situation. In something like that, I would look for signs of impatience and hostility versus signs of sensitivity, emotionality. The main application for that, I would think, is trying to determine, okay, is this person very intimate? Will this go better if I like talk to them and sort of tell them about my day and all this stuff? Or are they the kind of person where, I just need to be blunt, direct, straight to the point, and very logical, and then it'll be over. So to as sort of a case study with this, if I was meeting with this person and they had, let's say, a narrower, longer face, bigger inner face. So that means the facial features are more kind of spread out throughout the face. Bigger eyes, maybe protrude out a bit more with full upper eyelids, fuller lips. That tends to stand for expressiveness. This would be more so somebody that would be more interested in talking and connecting emotionally, a little more sensitive. On the contrary, if it was someone with a very broad, short, square or rectangular sort of face, deep set eyes, especially hooded eyes where you can't see the eyelids at all, that stands very much for a need for personal space. And I would especially watch out for a short upturned nose. That is going to stand for impatience. And on the whole, that whole look is going to stand for someone who's very direct, logical, maybe a little testy, maybe a little feisty. I'm partially describing my brother here, actually, which is one of those case studies of face reconnection. But he's got that upturned nose, that bulldog sort of look, and he's a very feisty, impatient sort of person. Not someone that you don't want to waste their time, something like that. So that would be one little case study with that of you can kind of imagine in your head these two contrasting looks, where it's the very sensitive
Right.
face versus the very practical, grounded, aggressive sort of face. Other examples that I've seen really useful that people really like, especially a lot of my paid clients, is job selection. So I get a lot of young guys, young ladies who are like, what do I do with my life? I don't know, should I go to college, do this or that? And so you can tell, like, well, it looks like you have a good social ability, good speaking ability. You can think on your feet, a good communicator in general. Maybe you could be a lawyer, or
Is this all obvious, visible in your face, in the structure of your face? Is that what you're saying?
yeah, the structure of the face, the specific facial features. And there's not generally there won't be kind of like one feature that says, well, you're all these different things, or you'd be a good lawyer or whatever. But you look for the correlations between kind of general trends, more wide set eyes, someone's more tolerant, more close set, more focused. And you sort of add them all up and you end up getting the big picture of like, oh, this person might be a great accountant, or another one is romantic compatibility, right? That's something people are always looking for, is what kind of person would be best for me? What would my soulmate look like? And so it's
Would
you have
that
to get very
would
thorough and
that
detailed.
I mean, that's interesting with the soulmate topic, because I've heard that discussion before, that we'll often choose someone who actually looks similar to us. So we would choose someone who might even look a bit like a brother or a sister. Do you find that to be somewhat true?
I do. I have seen that. There was recently, I have a Discord chat for my supporters on Patreon, and a lady just she posted a picture of her brother and his wife. And his wife actually looked like her. His wife looked a bit like his sister.
Yeah.
Even though she was actually Filipino. And they were white, so not even genetically close at all, but just coincidentally similar in the facial features. For sure, yeah, that's someone with those similar facial features can be very familiar to us, right? They're going to look and feel and act like someone we already know. and someone who is, I generally try to say there's kind of a balance you want, where, you do want some similarity, some broad familiarity in order to create that closeness. But there are a lot of cases where I say you kind of want a sort of opposites attract thing, where once you kind of have that baseline and certain features you want opposite for. So I mentioned the width of the eyes. I have somewhat wider set eyes. I'm a very big picture, tolerant, open-minded sort of person. Bad with details, though. And now my wife has closer set eyes. So she's very detail-oriented, very focused, and she actually runs the checkbook. She runs finances and budgeting and all that. Yes, narrow focus. And she's wonderful with it. And so that's a great case study of the opposites attract, because I try to get people going for long-term compatibility of the strengths and weaknesses. They balance each other out. And that's how I believe that's how you get true compatibility, is you look for someone who is able to get all your blind spots.
The show or the video that grabbed my attention with you was the Erica Kirk and Charlie Kirk video. And I really liked the way that you explained, and speaking about compatibility, you did mention that it was a strange relationship. It didn't seem like it was a romantic relationship, that it was more, I guess, I don't know, friends, whatever it might be. Please explain that. I don't know. I know we didn't speak about this before, but do you have any information that you could maybe share with us, or on any of the people, the public people you studied? Because I also think that's a very good thing for us to know, especially when we're dealing with politicians. We've heard about, often body language experts. We've spoken a lot about, also people that deal with the eyes, where you look when you're talking and what direction. I know that is also very relevant. But I'd love to hear from you, just in terms of, how do we spot a bullshitter when he's standing in, or she's standing in front of us and spinning us a yarn second to none, making golden promises of whatever it is. We have that a lot, whether it's politicians, lawyers, judges, ministers, the preachy guys. They've gotten away with nonsense for so long. It would be fantastic to be able to, within, let's say, half an hour. I mean, I'm not saying we've got to do this in 3 seconds flat. Hopefully in time that it will be like that, right? But then we'll have to have eyes on every dimension too. But just in terms of spotting people out there, especially high profile people that are baiting the public for votes on whatever level, stuff like that. Maybe talk us through that. As I said, the Erica and Charlie one was very interesting. Maybe you can start by highlighting that and just running us through that again.
Sure, lots of good points. Yeah. So with Erica and Charlie Kirk, they do have some dissimilarities, right? You can tell very much that Charlie Kirk is very much a serious, hard worker type. I didn't, when I analyzed him actually before he got shot, just sort of coincidentally, it was maybe a month before. When I looked at him, I really didn't see him too much as a natural speaker, entertainer, really as a worker, an agent. He did have sort of a quick intellect with that sloping forehead there, quick on his feet, quick thinker, but mostly what they would call in the system of the 4 temperaments, very choleric. So very serious, able to endure in the long term. If you've heard things from his friends and associates behind the scenes, I mean, the guy worked an insane schedule, and he was just always working. I mentioned a big interface. He famously had kind of a small interface. People would make memes about that, with his face proportionally to his head was kind of small. And that actually is a very strong sign. It shows stress resistance, shows that someone is kind of aloof and they aren't easily overwhelmed by stimulus. Someone with a larger interface, like I would say both of us, we would have larger interfaces. We're more sensitive, more receptive. On the one hand, we're able to pick up on these subtle signals and cues and emotional things. On the other hand, possibly maybe easily overwhelmed by that at times.
Yeah.
Someone like Charlie Kirk would be the opposite. And you see this with a lot of these professional political operators where they're doing get out the vote stuff. They're doing podcasts. They're doing public shows constantly. With Erica Kirk, you know, with someone very choleric like that, you tend to want someone who's very calming, stable, more phlegmatic. These tend to be maybe a slightly more heavyset person, you know, very calming, empathetic facial features. With Erica Kirk, I saw more intensity of her own, which was interesting. Somewhat choleric, but in a different sort of direction where it was more sanguine, Martian or Jovian, more aggressive, assertive, very outgoing. Ironically, she seemed to be the one who was more outgoing and more oriented towards public speaking than Charlie Kirk was, which might explain why, after he passed away, she so quickly just jumped in that role, because it seemed to be that was kind of what she was. I don't want to say anything necessarily conspiratorial, but it seems like that was more of her natural forte. I know she did acting and modeling, which is very typical for a more sanguine person like her, more optimistic, enthusiastic, outgoing. And, you know, it's not as bad as, you know, you don't want choleric and choleric, because then they're both trying to be in charge. They're kind of butting heads. But choleric and sanguine, it can work. There's a level of compatibility there. But like you mentioned, I see it more as a friend combination, maybe than necessarily life partner, friends or coworkers, because there's more of that balance where, you know, someone can manage the business side and the other person can be sort of the public face. I see that a lot with you know, business partners with that dynamic. And to your point about analyzing, you know, whether people are being honest or dishonest, you know, most of it you can just kind of tell about work style. That's the main thing of like what's their natural role. So with someone like Charlie Kirk, he was very public, but you can tell from his appearance, his physiognomy, as well as his mannerisms and how he lived his life, that he was very much a professional. Where I really saw his public speaking and all the spotlight stuff as very much kind of a means to an end, where he was more about running the organization, managing the business, you know, the more the serious topics, and the spotlight was sort of secondary to him. Something else you can tell with a lot of people, and something that you see with a lot of the politicians, the preachers, these elite types, you do see the small interface. That stands for a detachment. People with a small interface, they can very easily compartmentalize. This is Bill Clinton had a famously small interface, and someone asked him once, actually a reporter in the 90s asked him, Bill, how do you do it? You've got all these scandals going on. You're the president. You're running for re-election. How do you do it? And he said, I compartmentalize. And that's like Bill Clinton, Charlie Kirk. And you do see it with some people who do have these kind of sick inner lives. People like Harvey Weinstein also had a very small interface. It's sort of a two-edged sword there, where maybe this person is detaching and sort of retreating within themselves because they have a stressful job, you know, an intense job. Maybe they're doing it because there's something they're ashamed of. And that is something you can tell from eye asymmetry. If someone's left eyelid is very noticeably droopy, that generally stands for some sort of secret or childhood trauma, something in the private or personal life that they're kind of shying away from. You see that on a lot of both on trauma victims and sometimes trauma actors, like Harvey Weinstein himself had that. He had a lot of inner life secrets, a lot of things that he, you know, kind of wanted to not think about that he was doing. Lastly, I would say the thing that I've noticed the most with these politician types is the thin upper lip. You look at a lot of these people, I'm thinking of this because I was just discussing this with some of my followers in my Discord. They were asking me about it. And you see with a lot of the wealthiest, they were talking about Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, Kevin Warsh, Trump's new Federal Reserve chair. He's the son-in-law of Ronald Lauder, who's one of the billionaires involved with Epstein. They all have the very thin upper lip. And of course, the mouth and the lips specifically tell us about communication, talking. And the upper lip specifically stands for communication and relation with the outside world, with other people. And so when the upper lip is very thin or sometimes even non-existent, these people are going to be very hesitant to express what they really think and feel deep down with others. That trust needs to be earned. So they might be talkative, especially right. If they've got a wide mouth, they're going to be more talkative. But what they're saying is not going to automatically be the truth. Someone with a very full upper lip or just full lips in general, they're going to be a lot more expressive. You know, I think of someone like, maybe this is kind of a weird example, but I was just analyzing him. Glenn Beck, conservative commentator, big back in the Obama years in America. And, you know, he's got these very conspicuously full lips. And he is a very open, expressive, emotional sort of man, you know, unusual among other Republican types. But he's always been a, you know, wear his heart in his sleeve, be very open and expressive kind of guy. But among the upper echelons, the most elite people, you kind of always see the thin upper lip, because I think to get to that level, you have to do a lot of lying, or at the very least, you have to learn to keep your mouth shut. You have to be able to kind of play it close to the chest and, like, you know, not spill the beans on whatever you're working on.
Super fascinating. Sorry, I had myself on mute there.
No worries.
Interesting. One of our viewers was just saying as well, I think that's Prophetess X, that your one of your shows also popped up on her feed this week. So apparently you're meant to be Taylor. So this is a very good thing. Somebody was asking if you've analyzed Baron Trump. And then just as a comment here, Leanne was saying, I noticed that if someone is lying and they think they got away with that lie, they will smile as if they are proud of themselves for getting away with that lie. That's definitely that little... that I find that more with body language, though. Would that be body language, or is that more? I guess it's both, right? Facial.
There's an intersection. Yeah. There's
yes.
The terms I like to use are primary, secondary, and tertiary physiognomy. This is kind of, I'm going to come out with books on this eventually that I'm still doing research for, but this is kind of how I systematize it, where, you know, if physiognomy is just assessing the character by the appearance, well, there are lots of layers to that. So primary physiognomy is mainly what I do. That's the body, the face, the stuff you can't change, you know, without plastic surgery or long-term personal development. Secondary physiognomy would be clothing, hairstyles, stuff about your appearance, you know, that someone can look at you and tell instantly, or you can be told from a still photo. But, you know, you can change it. The third level would be tertiary physiognomy. That's the body language. That's the facial expressions, the little lies. I've also noticed a lot of times people, you know, who are lying, they'll kind of wait and look to see if the lie got through. I've been watching these new Epstein hearings, and you see this from Kash Patel a lot. He'll say something, and then he'll kind of look, make sure to try and tell if the person believes it. And so these are all kind of layers of physiognomy. Like I said, I specialize in the primary one. But there is an interesting intersection with the body, facial expression reading, and physiognomy when it comes to facial asymmetry. So what's fascinating here is you've got your two brain hemispheres, left brain and right brain. Your right brain is very intuitive, natural, spontaneous. And your left brain is much more calculated, self-controlled, maybe kind of inauthentic. And they control the opposite sides of the face and the body. And so your right brain controls your left side, left brain controls your right side. And so in face reading, and this is something that comes from Western, Chinese, it's pretty universal. The left side of someone's face, the features and expressions on the left side tell us about who they came into the world as, who they are by nature, who they are in private and in their personal life. And the features on the right side tell us about who they are in public, their public persona, their mask of sorts. And this is one I actually do for my some of my readings. I believe I did that for Erica Kirk, and with some of my with my clients especially, they love it. Where I will kind of make a Photoshop where I get, the left side, flip it, make a face out of 2 left sides and 2 right sides. And some people, you can see a really strong, stark difference there from this. And I use that to illustrate, okay, this is who you are deep down. This is who you are by nature, your true self. This is the mask you're putting on for other people. And I work with people to kind of try to resolve that, get those 2 sides of the personality sort of balanced out, so there's not this stark inner versus outer self difference. Yeah, I tend to find that's not the healthiest, where you're a totally different person in public and with strangers, and then you totally change in private. But the intersection with that and body reading, like official, scientifically verified FBI stuff, is with facial chirality, and this has to do with facial expressions, where if a facial expression is genuine, it's going to be symmetrical. If it's disingenuine, if it's not true, not genuine, it's going to be asymmetrical. And you find that it's actually pretty much always that, say with a fake smile, you will see it on the right side, on that false self side, because it's calculated. And so there are some pictures you can get, mug shots or celebrity pictures, where the right side, big smile, left side, neutral, or even like a frown or a scowl. And my personal theory for why you have this facial asymmetry in face reading is that if you have enough asymmetrical facial features over time, they sort of embed themselves on the face, right? You see this with smiling. People who are naturally optimistic, when they have a neutral expression, yep, exactly, the corners tend to go up. Pessimists, the corners tend to go down by nature. My wife is like that. My poor wife, she's a bit more of a pessimist, a bit more of a she's not really negative, but she tends to be able to see sort of the downside.
And it's really, but it's also the worry. I find a lot of people, and it's interesting how you're talking about obviously the right and the left side, because the left side is the feminine side of the body, right? So that would be that which is internalized, and obviously the right side, which is the assertive. So it's interesting when you the way you're speaking about the face as well, and the differences in terms of how that shows up on the face. But guys, here's the good news: face yoga can fix that. And start smiling. Start smiling. It's amazing. It's amazing how when you actually start enjoying life. I have watched as a healer now. And it's interesting that, from your perspective, where you're looking at something so specific. For me, it's really the energy. I look, I read the energy, and I'm connecting with the energy. So it's more the energy, but then you see the person and how they start glowing. Their health changes, their energy levels change. Suddenly, depression is not there, or it's much less. You're seeing the light. You can breathe. Many times people start losing weight. Everything changes, right? And I would imagine that the face, certainly, not just the smiliness, but I would imagine that can even be quite age reversing. What do you say about that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I very much believe that it's it's kind of a two-way street with that, or maybe that's not the right way to put it, but that you can change the face by changing the personality. So I have,
Yeah.
some people who message me and they're like, I hate this part of my face. It's so ugly. It's so bad. And how do I change it? And I say, well, the reason why it looks like that is because it's standing for this certain personality trait. And the way you would get rid of that is you would change it gradually, slowly, over time. You would, you build habits. You kind of build a new lifestyle, a new way of being, where you act more in the way that you might want to, and your face is going to change over time. I tell us, especially to younger people, teenagers, because nobody really looks that good as a teenager. People are kind of awkward, uncomfortable. We don't really know who we are. We're still growing and changing and developing. And that's one case where very much the face is reflecting the personality, kind of awkward face for an awkward personality. And I've seen in my own life, as my personality has developed and I've improved, I've seen my face change to match. One case study of this for me is that I used to have in face reading, and they talk about this in plastic surgery as well, in the beauty world, the canthal tilt. So that has to do with the tilt of the eyes. So a positive canthal tilt is kind of the eyes kind of go up and in like a cat, and the negative canthal tilt, they are maybe a little more droopy, right?
It's
So yours might
probably
be
me.
neutral, maybe a little negative.
Yeah, neutral, negative. Maybe 10 years ago, they might have been up a little bit more.
Yeah. And so what that stands for is that a positive canthal tilt, that inward slant, means that someone is very confident, assertive. They're able to put their own interest over those of others. But a negative canthal tilt means that they're more of a people pleaser, put the interests of others over their own. And so that is why a positive canthal tilt is almost always seen as very attractive on both men and women, because confidence is attractive. But then, so with my own life, I used to have much more of a negative canthal tilt, and I was very much a people pleaser. This also has to do with my I have a very thin lower lip. It's very, very unusual. My upper lip's fuller than my lower lip. Most people, it's the other way around. I mentioned the upper lip stands for outside communication. The lower lip stands for inner communication. So you'll see spiritualists, artists, these people who are very in touch with their inner world of feelings, world of spirit. They'll have a very full lower lip. They will be really in touch with that inner world. Me, not so much. It's quite thin. It used to be even thinner. But I'm not a person who's super about my own feelings. It can be a problem sometimes. Like I'll something will happen and someone will be like, how do you feel about that? Like, I have no idea. I don't know. You tell me.
Wow.
But so with that plus the negative canthal tilt, I used to be a very passive people pleaser, where it's just sort of the people in my life. It's like, oh, do whatever you want to do what you want to do. And I realized that was a problem, around the time I got married. And I was thinking, well, I don't want to be this way. It's not good for me, not good for the people in my life. And so I have to, and so I worked for years on being more assertive, confident, more capable of asserting myself and being like, it's going to be this way. And then, one day I wake up and I look in the mirror and, I notice, and it wasn't all of a sudden, but it was sort of a gradual thing that where one day I noticed, and I finally realized that it had been changing. I had more of a positive canthal tilt going. I had more of those confident, assertive eyes, and the look as a whole had changed a bit to be a bit more, kind of driven, assertive. And I was like, wow, I wasn't even trying for that. Didn't even really notice that it was changing, because, all these facial features, they change so gradually, just like the personality, with few exceptions, people generally don't become a totally different person overnight. It's kind of a gradual change where over the span of years, you can kind of see a shift from you were this way, now you're this way. So I've seen that in my own life and with people.
It's amazing that, because it's, I always say, you know, the body's designed to heal itself. And I've watched that with health. I've watched that with dis-ease in the body, you know, as we've changed perceptions around things and understood things. I believe understanding is key to everything. And then healing occurs of itself. And it seems that this is exactly what happens with the face as well. It's all part of course it is, you know, it's all part of the facial anatomy, right? So naturally, it would, I mean, if the body's going to heal itself, if you can heal your organs, of course, you know, your facial structure, I guess, as you enjoy life more, step into the fullness of life more, your physical form also takes on that shape. I mean, I do yoga. I love yoga. I really do. I mean, I love the breathing, the stretching, the physical expression of having, because yoga is a prayer to the divine through your body. And, you know, every movement is an expression of that. So for many years, I've used that as my way of expressing, honoring, thanking, appreciating, forgiving, whatever it might be, you know. And I have to say, I can honestly say, I truly believe that has been my saving grace in terms of health over and over and over again, you know. And it makes a lot of sense, you know, when we just, again, and how the face will change once we change our way of thinking, way of being, everything like that. That's amazing. And it's wonderful to see that as well. And to
Yeah.
notice as well, you know, when we're looking at certain features, also noticing the eyes, the shiftiness of the eyes, you know, because that says a lot, doesn't it? The eyes being the windows to the soul. What do you say about that?
Yeah, that's another trait you see in very successful people who are also very kind of maybe a little suspicious is the very small beady eyes. When someone has those very narrow eyes, that
And they
means they
can't
are,
look at you. They can't look
yeah,
at you.
they're untrusting, they're cynical,
Mm.
they are perceptive and sly. You know, we like big eyes because big eyes mean that someone is innocent, naive. You know, children have big eyes, and they're very trusting, open, not a threat. Um, you know, people with those very small, narrow eyes, they're people who live and exist in a world where they can't trust anybody. So you see these in people, you know, politicians, of course, people who might be involved in spycraft, espionage, conspiracies, that sort of stuff. You also see it in people just in the corporate world in general, people in high finance, where there are these sort of cutthroat deals that are going on. There's very, very much a lot you can tell from the eyes, and you know, a lot of this is very intuitive. A lot of it gets used in art and character design. I have a few different subsets of my audience. I have people who are more mystical, more spiritual, people who are more scientific, and I have a lot of people who follow me who are just artists. You know, they don't even necessarily. Some of them have said, you know, they say they don't necessarily believe in this. They don't know if it's real or not, but they say, hey, I use this for character design actually, because whether you believe in it or not, intuitively, subconsciously, everyone kind of believes this stuff. Like we all kind of have these intuitive guesses, even if you don't have necessarily this gift where you can look at someone and be like, they're this way, but we kind of have these feelings, these vibes where it's like, that person seems nice, that person seems mean, seems kind of sharp, kind of not so much. And we because of that, that's reflected in art. So you see this a lot in paintings, cartoons, character designs, you know, the simple stuff that kind of everyone knows, like big mouth means he's talkative, big eyes, innocent, small eyes,
Mm.
untrustworthy. You know, they would
Yeah.
have design sheets for I think it was Looney Tunes maybe, where they would say, you know, if a character's smart, draw them like this with the big head, and if they're like a big brute, draw them with a big jaw, and that's, you know, a square face shape. And so there's you know, this stuff, when you really get into it, you find that physiognomy, you know, as an art and a science, it permeates everything, and I think that has to do with I mean, it says a lot for the fact that I think there definitely is something to it. You know, you look at these different traditions of Chinese versus Western, you know, independently developed, and they use different terms, different words for it. You know, of course, Western is 4-element, Chinese is 5-element, but they'll end up saying this, the same facial features mean the same thing. And even though they're talking about it in completely different terms, the actual observation is the same across cultures.
It's the same.
Yeah,
Yes.
and it has to do with the, like you were talking about with yoga, very strongly with the intersection of the body and the soul. And that's one of the main things I emphasize in my videos, but especially with client consultations when I'm talking with people about personal development. I say you really can't divide the body and the soul. You know, there are differing views on this. So Christian, Islamic, Jewish, you'd say the body and the soul are made for each other. Hindu, Buddhist, maybe you'd say, you know, the body's more of a vessel, the soul is independent of it. In any case, as we are now, we are embodied creatures. We're body and soul together, and the two will influence each other. If you take care of your body, you're going to feel better, think quicker. And if you neglect your body, you're going to be groggy and mentally out of shape too. You really can't neglect the body. And so there really is an intersection there where, you know, if you want to feel a certain way, you want to be a certain way, you know, this is why so many spiritual practices are physical. They involve the body. You know, it's not just, well, just kind of sit and just think this thing. It's like you do breathing exercises, you do certain motions, you do kind of these ritual motions. It's to get your body involved and get the body and soul in sync. And I think all of that sort of ties in with how, you know, it's all sort of part of the overall whole of the body and soul being one, being united, you know, as above, so below. We can also say as within, so without.
Right. Interesting. I was saying that in an earlier show. I'm of the firm opinion the body is the manifestation of the soul. It is the soul in physical form, which is why the body is the most intelligent vehicle you'll ever possess. 50 trillion odd cells awaiting to be unlocked, which is really the spirit in physical form, which is why as we grow and evolve and express and experience life, our consciousness evolves and expands. And that's shown in the body as well. And I believe, you know, in my experience, like we eat less and less. It's like, you know, in my experience, and I know everyone is different, just eating flesh of another creature is just not even on my thought process anymore. That's the way I feel. I'm not saying everyone feels that way. But it's like going back to, I do believe we eat way too much. I don't believe we need 3 meals a day. Because I think, and especially with the types of food that we've been fed over the years, you think about the sugar, the processes, everything, and how that affects every system in the body. I mean, that's a whole topic for another day, right? But as we start eating less food and we start eating more consciously, whatever that might be for the individual, you know, I was hearing the other day, there are people on this planet that are breatharians. They literally live by breath alone and a few sips of water. Now, I mean, to have reached that space of being, I mean, you cannot operate in normal circles, okay? You can't be going to spa and wherever, right? I mean, like the shopping centers. But that's what I say. I think, because think about it, in spirit, you don't need food. It's only really, that we eat food. So as we eat more consciously, which is why, you know, as a human, I think we made up of 4: spirit, emotion, mental, mind, and body, like the table with the 4 legs. And those 3 invisible aspects of ourselves will be manifested in the physical being. So if you're spiritually connected to the divine, you're going to have this inflow of consciousness, which awakens the truth of who you are and what you need to do. It like prompts you to take the next um, logical step for you. And if you're in tune, you're going to hear that. So emotionally, you're going to start flowing, which is the water, because spirit is fire. We work with the 4 elements here. And after the 4, yes, then you become the 5th, the ether, right? So it's the fire, which is the spirit in my equation of doing things, which awakens you to remembering the true source of your connection. You're not some random piece of human bouncing around without a purpose. That's what most humans, unfortunately, I think, and then they get lost and do all sorts of shady things. And then we start reconnecting with our emotions and our intellect, our thoughts, our memories, and all of that. And I think it's a synonymous thing. Emotions, mind, and then once we've opened up those pathways, it then moves into the body, where the body then receives that healing and the consciousness evolves. And then you need less of stuff that drain you. That's the thing, when we're again looking at Eastern teachings, there's sattvic, rajic, rajasic, and tamasic food. And when you're looking at those 3 types of food, you understand when you're eating like sort of sattvic food, which is really fruits, veg, everything that's come from the earth, from the sun, it's in the soil, it's organic, all of that stuff. It nurtures the body in the most natural way the body needs it. So when we start looking at things like that, our consciousness definitely changes. We start making different choices. I don't know, what's your take on all that? Because I think in my mind, it all fits in.
It all works. There's I work with 4 temperaments, and there's a lot of stuff with that has to do with diet, even climate, the best sort of exercise, right? So I get a lot of these young guys, and maybe there is something to be said for the vegetarianism. Lent is upcoming, and I'm going to go vegan for that time. I'm Anglican, but I'm looking to do an Eastern Orthodox style Lenten fast. So it's, Eastern Orthodox, they do no animal products for all of Lent. It's a time of spiritual purification and purgation. And then, but you definitely have different lifestyles, different bodies and whatnot, that different diets that are better or worse for these different body types and these different sort of archetypes and spirit types. So we have I get a lot of younger guys who they'll want to be, they're young, insecure, and they want to be the big bodybuilder. And they're like, no, I have to eat red meat and I have to work out. And I say, well, no, you're more melancholic. You're more of a sensitive type. You should be in the arts. You should be eating light, have some nuts, have some leafy greens. And that's something they talk about in the French school of physiognomy, morphopsychology, about the different diets for different types, where, a lot of the red meats, the heavy sauces, they say for some people can handle it better than others, but for a lot of people, it overwhelms the digestive tract. And then it gets all sorts of problems and issues from that. So there's a very strong intersection between, because it does have to do very much with the body, with this, and diet, exercise, all of these bodily health things. And there are a lot of clients, obviously the more fitness side oriented ones, that I get into this with them.
The food, like for example, what we like in the Eastern teachings, the tamasic food is what should never be touched, eaten. That's like dead food. So anything that's processed, it's like cardboard food. And then, of course, any meat, because you're eating death. So as long as you're eating death, you're draining your energy. And it's very interesting when you start understanding nutrition around the Ayurvedic side of things. And also, like with vegetarianism, it's also how you combine vegetables, because like when you combine, for example, sweet peas and beans or something, I can't remember exactly what it is, the combination of the two actually creates a protein that the meat would create, but it's not of another animal, it's of the earth. So there's all sorts of things, and I know that affect us. It's true, because I think we've also been so conditioned to doing things in a certain way. In many ways, we've forgotten how to do these things, right? And how to actually connect with those elements. But anyway, what I wanted to do is get back to what we were saying earlier on. I would love to know your take on, of course, Jeffrey Epstein right now. That's the hot topic on everyone. And you had to know I was going to ask you, right? And I'm sure you must have done an analysis on him over the past few weeks and what's going on there. So I'd love to hear what your take on having done a facial analysis on Jeffrey Epstein.
For sure. Yeah, so I did a face read on Epstein. I think it was June or July of last year, which just goes to show how long this this whole thing has been in the news cycle. And then after that, a few months after, I did an analysis on Ghislaine Maxwell. And now, since it's all back in the news, and I mean, this is the biggest story ever. I mean, this is bigger than Watergate. These files and the cover up that's going on. It's an unbelievable thing to see. The consciousness change has been great. As a guy who was the one weirdo 10 years ago in 2016, reading the WikiLeaks files and reading them talking about the pizza and the hot dogs and the coded language for the abuse. And I was at the time, it felt like I was the only one, right? There were a few podcasts, but it was all censored. Now everything has come out. All that was hidden has become new. I keep tabs on the astrology stuff, and I know we are in a Saturn-Neptune conjunction, and that's when secrets become unveiled and secret societies get exposed throughout history. So I'm working on a video now actually about Jeffrey Epstein's associates, because that's the new thing that's come up from the files, is these people like Howard Lutnick, Les Wexner, Alan Dershowitz, all of these types, these Israeli and American billionaires who are running with him. But with Jeffrey Epstein, you actually see first off, he's very choleric, pure choleric, not like Charlie Kirk. So cholerics are very hardworking, diligent, almost obsessive workaholics. And what's significant with him is that cholerics do also tend to have a stronger sex impulse, sex drive. It's sort of I think a side effect of that strong energy to work. And yes, just drive, almost
the channeling.
Yes, very intense. And the other thing is interestingly, he had I think I would actually identify him as having the same face shape as you, which is the Uranus face shape, long, narrow trapezoid. And we, of course, know what sign Uranus rules. It's Aquarius. And Jeffrey Epstein was an Aquarius. And so, yeah, he was. His birthday was recently. And
I'm not surprised, actually. I'm not surprised that, because I mean, if you look at, and especially if you're looking, sorry to interrupt you, but just if we're moving into the age of Aquarius and you look at the dark side of that, that is all about viruses, technology, perversions.
Yes, it's weirdness, eccentricity.
Yes, and absolutely.
That's the intersection. I say you and Jeffrey Epstein have the same face shape, had the same archetype. How could that be? Well, I call the Uranus face shape, I call it the philosopher archetype, the visionary philosopher. And these people are pretty much always eccentrics, oddballs, people on the fringes, people pushing the envelope for stuff where it's something, ideas, paradigms, frameworks that no one else would consider, but they go at it. One historical example of a Uranus face shape, who's kind of in a more of a conventional political world, but was still first time very radical, Andrew Jackson, where people remember him for the tragedies of the Indian Removal Act and the Trail of Tears. But at the time, Andrew Jackson was mostly known for being a very radical populist, where it was under him that they got rid of the property requirement to vote. And so that was the first step towards, say, universal suffrage. That's when you get Jacksonian democracy. And he was very much a radical, a rebel. The whole political establishment hated him because he was this kind of backwoods hillbilly cowboy type. And then we see, you know, with someone like Jeffrey Epstein, he was very much an eccentric, a radical, a purported philosopher. I don't think he definitely thought he was smarter than he was. If you read his stuff or watch his interviews, he definitely thought he wanted to be a philosopher. He wanted to be an intellectual. This is why he was always emailing and inviting scientists. And he had very strange ideas about transhumanism and mind control, all of this really weird, radical stuff. And you can very much see that angle with him. And then with you, of course, you have your own thing about yoga and healing and this very visionary philosophy. So it's almost like a light and dark side, like you were saying, the dark side of Aquarius, which is
wow, it's so fascinating what you said there. When was his birthday? Do you know? Because mine was a few days ago.
Yeah, it was.
Interesting. That very interesting.
Yeah.
You know, and it's true because, you know, again, it's about intention and choices, isn't it? And I guess when just because you're meeting someone with a similar face shape, you've got to look, it's not just about that, but I guess the bone structure and the shape is what you're born with, but your life experiences would then determine what life is coming out of your face, right? You know what I'm saying? So the glint in your eye, is it a glint in your eyes or is it a sparkle in your eye? There's a difference. How do you use the life force that God has given you?
Exactly. It's all, that is something I very much emphasize, is that, listen, you're, you can, you know, yeah, we're all born with these predisposed, you know, these predispositions, these things that we might naturally lean towards. But at the end of the day, we do still have moral choice. And you can still choose.
Yeah,
you're still
absolutely
free to choose right and wrong, even though
absolutely.
You know, we're tempted by different
100%.
sins. I will say, I just looked it up. Last thing, Jeffrey Epstein, born January 20th. So right on the cusp between Capricorn and Aquarius.
Capricorn.
The money, yes.
Interesting. Yes, money and science. Look at that.
Yeah.
Because Aquarius is about science and technology. So if you look at that, that's money and science. Wow.
That's what he was all about. It's very interesting.
I mean, I still question whether he actually, you know, I mean, I know there's no doubt in my mind he was the face and the front for so many other people, you know. I mean, if you look at the Epstein files, you're seeing millions of pictures of him and very few of other people, right? It's like they've made it all about him. So it's like, okay, so was it really all about him? And, or what the hell's going on here? But anyway, I know we're just about running out of time, but I want to ask you, somebody asked about Baron Trump. If you've ever done an analysis on him. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on. He's an interesting character, that, my gosh, isn't he? He's like, you don't see him much. He doesn't come out much, and he's like 6'9" or something. And that's fine for me. I come from a family of tall men, so I actually quite like that. That's not weird to me at all, because I guess I come from the giants as well, so I quite like that. But what is your take on Baron Trump?
Yeah, well, it's been interesting seeing him come into his own over the past 10 years now. What I see with him is a lot of sensitivity. He has, I don't know if he'd be a pure melancholic, but he has sort of the sloping side profile that is melancholic, kind of a bird-like look when seen from the side. He people compare him to these old Greek statues, Alexander and whatnot, and that's very much a shared sensitivity. I see, especially in his face. You can see in his eyes, there's a certain degree of sadness there, and a lot of just overall sensitivity would be the main word. I think he's and I think this is why, you know, he stays out of this spotlight. His mother keeps him under the spotlight because he's a very, and both the good and bad of sensitive there. I think he could probably be a little reactive, maybe a little overly desirous of outside validation, maybe a bit testy, can get maybe easily offended. But on the plus side, I think he is probably one of the more empathetic members of his family. I think you can see a lot of thoughtfulness, especially very, very deep set eyes. And that stands for someone who's very calculated, withdrawn, very much think before they speak. Yeah,
Smart.
clever, definitely intelligent, clever, sensitive, and cautious, I would say, with him. Where he does have,
Definitely.
this quick mind, but I see a lot of caution and for sure a lot of anxiety with that. Yeah.
I was going to say the same thing. There's so much depth to him. I think he knows so much more goes on in his mind than what he actually speaks about or shares with those around. Very intelligent soul, super duper intelligent. What's your take on, there's a lot of talk on him possibly being the future president and groomed for that sometime in the future. I'm not asking you to comment on that because it's irrelevant, really. But if you're looking at his features, the way he looks right now, would you see that is a possibility, that he carries those traits, characteristics of a great leader? Because I just think by his size alone, and yes, just because someone is tall and carries themselves well does not mean that they are a good leader, but they tend to be trusted more as leaders, right? Just by the mere, and especially if he has a pleasant demeanor about him as well, like a gentle way, and like he has, he doesn't come across as being this big rush guy, like one of the jocks that's going to go out and, I don't know, beat 12 guys up tonight because they irritated him at baseball or whatever it is. I would say he's kind as well. He's sensitive. He will let you speak instead of overriding you. But definitely don't get him in a grumpy mood, because I can imagine that he probably would not. Yeah, he's quite impatient when
there is some
maybe.
Intensity there, sensitivity. With melancholic, it's all about passion, sensitivity, intensity. Moodiness as well, and a quick thinking, and you very much see that with him, and that's when you look at, especially at a side profile, and there is something to that. It does kind of look like it's something off of an ancient Roman coin,
right?
He has this
absolutely
very Alexander or Caesar kind of side profile going on there.
Yes.
I do think, regardless of his the current political situation, his own father's legacy specifically, I think that is a good case study where you can see the potential there very much for an inspirational, radical type leader, right? Because leadership's a very complex thing. Even with political leadership, there are lots of different kinds you can have. So you have, you go for an extreme example, Stalin and Hitler, both dictators. Hitler was very Venusian. He had a Venus face shape. He's all, an astrologer friend was telling me, he was all loaded up with Taurus and Libra. Like he had a pretty strong Taurus stellium, I think it was. And so he was all about the spoken word and family and acquiring land. And he was the charismatic speaker. Stalin was not actually a good inspirational speaker. Stalin was a bureaucrat. He was the secretary. That's why they called him general secretary, because he was Lenin's secretary. And, he had this more square face shape, beady, small eyes. And so he would just kind of move around the papers and manipulate people in order to get himself in charge. And so you can see there are different styles. You have more of the inspirational upfront leader. You have more of the bureaucrat, more of the king type, all these different varieties. with Baron, I see the Alexander thing, where it's the inspirational figure, where I think if he got up and gave some rousing speech, he could really drive people. Now, like with Alexander, I see problems with long-term stability, because Alexander, of course, he conquers the whole known world. He goes from Macedon and gets all of Persia. He marches all the way to India. He only stops because his army threatens to revolt. That's the only reason he didn't also conquer India. And then he dies and his empire falls apart into like 3 or 4 different kingdoms. And so I see very much like intense fire, where, it's going to burn hot, but kind of probably burn short. I would see, if he would want to go for a long-term political thing, he would need kind of a Dr. Watson type to sort of balance him out, stabilize him. And this kind of ties back into the sort of opposites attract. You want, if you're a very intense, quick person, go for someone stable.
Do you think he's political material, though, from what you're seeing? I mean, I think, we different people are obviously designed to excel at different things. And I'm wondering if he would be long-term political material, as you say.
Yeah, I would say that in certain like radical, once in a generation kind of circumstances, he could have a very strong role. But like I said, it's intense fire. And in terms of a political career, a lifetime in politics, I don't see that with him too much, just because I think he's too sensitive, too empathetic, where you have to have a certain level of kind of, because I have friends who work in state politics, federal politics, kind of behind the scenes, and it's a lot of boring stuff. I think with our current system in America, kind of the best case scenario that I see is someone like a Thomas Massey, where he's very much a bulldog type, direct, straight shooter, someone who can handle all that stress, but is still very much has some of that empathy, sensitivity, while being able to kind of maintain composure. With Baron, I would just say I think he's too sweet for politics, from what I see, honestly, just off the cuff, just based on what I see from him. He seems like he'd be too kind, too sensitive for that kind of nasty
because that is world. Truly it's a brutal, disgusting world, that isn't.
Yeah.
It's really, and I'm just seeing Lisa D actually said the stepdaughter's friend went to school with him, said he was very kind. Yeah, so that shows. It's obviously, well, it would be great. I think, whatever he does in life, I wish him well. But it's just interesting.
Seems like a good kid.
Yeah, he's obviously the product of such an influential family, and such a divisive, world right now, divided world right now. The poor guy. I wonder what he must feel like when he wakes up in the morning with all this craziness going on around him. It was like, just leave me alone, guys. I'm just staying in my room. I'm just gonna hang out here with my computer today. Poor guy. Shame. Anyway, Taylor, thank you so much. Wow, what an interesting conversation. I really, really enjoyed it. And I would love to have you back again, if you'd be kind enough to join us again for another show. And just go into, maybe expand more on stuff. And if there's anything, I think it's a super interesting topic. And I think it's really important that we as human beings get to know these things. We can save ourselves a lot, actually, because and I speak on behalf of women especially, and I know men are very intuitive men, but women are often very, very intuitive, and we don't trust ourselves. Or also, women have often been taught not to speak up, right? Like, just don't cause trouble, go with the flow kind of thing. And that's how we get ourselves into trouble. Our intuition screams at us. And I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I hear so many of these stories, these dating stories, these horror dates and what have you. I'm going,
Mm-hmm.
how could you even have gone with a guy in the first place? What are you thinking? Like, but I understand as well, our intuition is telling us one thing, but the crowd is telling you another, or
Mm-hmm.
we're just not sure. And this person is so well presented and got this like slick way of speaking. But I think it's wonderful to be able to notice things like this, notice the way their eyes are, notice the situation, as you say, of their face. But as you say, me and Jeffrey Epstein both have a Uranus face. I'll tell you now, I ain't done nothing like you've done. The opposite thereof, the absolute opposite thereof. So, one can't always just judge by a photograph and say, okay, well, that one must have done that. There's got to be some other contributing factors: body
Mm-hmm.
language, eye contact, energy, intuition, right? I don't
Yeah.
know. What do you say about that?
Yeah, for sure. I like to say that, physiognomy, the face isn't nothing, but it isn't everything, to be sure.
Yeah,
And I
but
can
it's a
really,
lot.
yeah. And I tell people I can't really tell moral choice. I mentioned Adolf Hitler being very Venusian. Another figure with a very similar physiognomy, choleric, Venus face, Mahatma Gandhi. Both leaders, both champions of their own people, of their nation, but both took it in very different directions. And that's because
Right. Well,
there's no facial feature that predestines someone for good or for evil. It's up to us. We're born with a certain um, amount of skills, abilities, predispositions, but it's up to us to choose what we do with that.
it's so true. And I think when we're in tune with that, then we can, and we're seeing a politician or a preacher or a lawyer or whatever they might be. Usually when we're finding these scabangas out there, right? These dodgy
Mm-hmm.
ones, you'll be able to, that for me is important. We must wake up and educate ourselves on these things. People like you are available out there to teach us. And I think it's so important that we can just start looking at these things, noticing, this is this is what the awakening is. It's not just some poof, some great big spiritual epiphany, and suddenly we move into 12th dimension and never have a problem again in our lives. The awakening is realizing these things, waking up to, wow, I now understand reading a face is very beneficial because I can see this and this. Ooh, hang on. I'm just going to wait a minute here. Let me just check this before. And that's also what I'm doing. A lot of the shows I'm doing on the solutions at the moment is all about listen, don't act, don't make a decision right now. Let it land with you. Let it see, how does your body feel, because it's all about the truth lies within us, and the
Mm.
truth will resonate with truth. That's the thing. Truth is always going to resonate with truth, but deception has a wonderful way of deceiving truth or deception that makes it seem like truth, but then you're not sure, and then everything goes, oh no, and then we need to just like collapse, don't we? When no one knows anything anymore. And that's when you've got to become resonant. And that's where it's
Yeah.
beautiful when people like you are showing us these things. So thank you for that. I
Yeah.
really appreciate you joining
Thank you.
us.
Thank you for having me. It was great. And
Is there anything, is there anything you'd like to share, and maybe let our viewers know where they can find you? If anyone would like to, it seems to me what you're saying, you're offering sessions as well, consultations. Yeah.
yeah, I do. I've had to raise the prices recently because the demand was so high. I was just getting overwhelmed by orders from so many people all over the world. But yeah, I do client consultations. Some are just you'll just send photos and I'll analyze them, and I make up a whole document where it's kind of like in my a written version of one of my videos where I'll show the face shape illustration and sort of go all the way down from start to finish of everything that I would cover in a video. And some of the higher packages include like a live consultation call where we kind of talk through everything. And sometimes I do a little bit of body language reading on that, right? Sometimes a lot of stuff will kind of come together based on how people act and how people present themselves. So I do that. That's on my website, ProopaInsights.com. And my main content resource is, of course, my YouTube channel, Proopa Insights. You can just look it up on YouTube and I'll be there. And I try to get out at least one video a week, trying to go for 2 videos a week. Sometimes differs depending on my schedule for that week, how busy I am. But I should have a new video coming out this Saturday, hopefully.
Nice. Well, guys, if you haven't checked out Taylor's stuff, I highly recommend that you do. Very, very informative. And yes, I'd love for you to be back and we can talk about some of these faces and places of people we're seeing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, week of fun.
Thank you, Taylor. Take good care of you. And maybe hang on, if you don't mind, behind the scenes, and then we can just arrange a next date. Okay, guys, take it easy. God bless you all. I will see you tomorrow on Drop In with Shanti. I think it's 4 o'clock South African time. That's 3.5 hours earlier than now. Wherever in the world you are. Take care, and I'll see you also over the weekend. We've got JR Sweet on Saturday. Don't forget, new guest as well. Mormon monarch survivor. Crazy story. So as always, let's support our survivors. Thanks, guys. God bless you all, and I'll see you very, very soon. Mwah.